My name is Marc Alhadeff, and I'm a photographer, but also I'm the writer for the Sony Alpha.blog, where I have tested more than 350 lenses for Sony E-mounts. So really, I've compared most of what exists in the market for now. So you will find on that website, everything that exists for the Sony ecosystem. And including, I have also linked to that Flickr website where you find more than 30,000 photos made with these 300 lenses. So you can download it, it's free. You can then see them full size, 60 megapixel. If you want to pixel peep and compare, everything is available for you. And also there is a YouTube where you see video sample of all that lens. So really, if you wish to buy a lens, you hesitate, you can have really a sample of everything and make your own judgment. So today I will speak to you about mostly the 70-200mm Mark II, which is this lens here. And you will find everything that I will say will be, if you want to look back after, is in the article on my blog. I have received many questions from my readers versus, okay, is that lens worth its price? What about the Tamron 70-180? What about the Tamron 35? What about the GM Mark I? And so I have prepared here some, image sample and the comparison that I made among all those lenses, and I will highlight what are the pros, and the cons, and what are recommendations depending on what is your key priorities for you, and then you can make your own judgment in what you want to do. Okay, I will show you first, and let me switch here. Okay, do you see the camera? Yes, it's okay for you? Okay, so here is the lens. One of the key characteristics of that lens is versus its predecessor is that it's very, very light. It's only around 1 kilogram and versus 1.5 almost for the V1. So it's really a big game changer if you carry it on a day-to-day for weddings or something like that. It's very, very light. And if you compare to, and I will switch, if you compare it with things like, the Tamron 35-150 that is being shown here, those lenses have, the extent when you zoom in, whereas the Sony is fixed length. So if you do that and you do some video, extending the lens, you lose always a little bit the balance. So you get instabilities versus something that is really fixed length. And versus shutter lens that is almost exactly the same weight. The Tamron is 100 grams heavier even. In fact, the Sony is really, I would say, much better design for me because the center of gravity is really next to the body. The center of gravity is really here, and it's very light to carry it all around. So I've used it for 6-7 hours walking the street to make my test. As not, tired at all. It was really like it was a very small lens attached to the body. But when I tested this, for example, this Tamron 35-150, it's very, very front heavy. And so after 1 hour, you start already to shake a little bit because it's really not at all the same balance, and it's much more painful, I will say, to use for me on a day-to-day. So if you shoot extended hours, this is for me something key, to be always not tired after 1 or 2 hours of use. This is really key for me. So let's go back. That was for the weight. If you look at the ergonomics, we'll look at the buttons that you see here. There is everything that is possible to have on that lens, from distance limitators to limit the distance, the AMF. You've got a click or clickless aperturing that is, and you can make it clickless with a button that is here on the side. So if I put this, then you've got an aperturing that is without click, which is perfect for video. You've got things like the full-time DMF, which allow to get your focus and directly change the focus without going to MF, which is really quite convenient. You've got, of course, the focus all button that you can set up with whatever function you want in the body. If you don't like or don't want to use the aperturing, you can set it up to the A position. And then in the A position, in fact, you control the aperture via the body, so classical one. And you can even, with a button that is iris lock, you can block the iris, the aperturing in that position so that you are not touching or change the settings by mistake. You also have the OSS, so the optical stabilization that you can put on and off if you need to on tripod, for example. And you've got the panning mode. So the mode 1 is classical all-around mode for general purpose. The mode 2 is really when you pan horizontally, and the 3 is more a mode for sports with erratic movement that goes everywhere when you try to follow up such kind of movement. In terms of ergonomic, you also have the possibility to rotate here the lens. If you are on a tripod and you need to rotate the lens. Here I've got, let's say, one little, for me, it's really minor, but which is not perfect for that lens, is that see here the mark, so that you have a mark here at every 90 degrees. But there is some lens on Sony that have a little click there every 90 degree, which is best to really position yourself at the 90 degree. Here, unfortunately, you don't have that little click and lock to really put the lens back to the original position. What else? The aperture, the lens hood is also very well designed. It's circular, whereas in the GM1 it was a tulip shape. And so thanks to that really circular, yeah, it's back to normal. Thanks to that circular lens hood, you can just put the lens, on the floor. It will be very stable and stay there. And you've got this little rubber here that will absorb the shock. If you look at others like Tamron, etc., it's just plain plastic. You cannot set it up like that. And there is no rubber. It does not absorb any shock in case you need to put it on the ground, etc. One little thing is also that you find on that lens hood is that windows that allow to turn a circular polarizer if you have one. Okay. So in terms of tripod color, this is the original one, but I don't really like it because there is no direct Arca Swiss compatible plate on it. So for all those white Sony lens like the 260, the 400 2.8, the 140, I use those Leophoto tripods that are compatible with that. And the big advantage is that they are directly Arca Swiss compatible, so they can be put on a ball head on your tripod, and they are larger so that even to transport them, you can get them well in the hand. Okay, so this is something I do for all those lenses to get this Arca Swiss directly tripod collar. Okay, I think that's it for just the ergonomics. I don't know if you have already questions related to that, related to just the specs.
Yeah, so apologies to everybody. The intention was for me to be pinned down a very small thumbnail size image. So for most of you, I think I was split screen for the first 5 minutes or so. Apologies for that distraction. I do have one question, maybe not so much related to the ergonomics. Nonetheless, it's a direct question, the first one that we have. So I'd like to encourage everybody to keep on posting. It's from Jan. He's considering upgrading his F4 70-200 zoom to a 2.8 and is wondering if the one-stop increase in speed is worth it, or whether he should go for the 100 to the 400, as he's doing a lot of more landscape, let's say, than portrait. So before you answer that, I'd like to ask everybody to post the questions in the Q&A, but thank you, Jan, for that question. Did you understand it, Mark?
Yeah. So I will say it also depends of your body. If you've got a 24 megapixel body, the 70-200 F4, it's good for that. If you have a 50 or 60 megapixel, really the sharpness of the F4 is not able to fully resolve the full potential of a 50-60 megapixel sensor. It's more designed for the 24. And so depending of your body, yes, the 100-400 or 70-200 with a teleconverter can really make a better job. But if you have an A7 III, the 70-200 F4 is good enough. If you want if 200 millimeter, it's enough for you, but it will be enough in terms of resolution and adapted to that sensor. If you have the A7R 3, 4, or the A1, then it's best to have the 104, 100 or the new GM2 with TC eventually. Okay, for that questions, that answered I hope.
Yeah, that's it for now. So keep them coming. Thank you.
Okay, one thing I wanted to show you also is the teleconverter that you see. Just let me zoom back a little bit. Okay, you've got the two TC 1.4 and TC2, and that is also unique with those Sony lens that the others do not have. Only the Sony native lens can support those teleconverters. And I must say that people are sometimes afraid of these teleconverters because of high speed, etc. With bodies like the A7 IV, the one, etc., where they can focus up to f16 with still high tracking, you really do not notice any difference of high speed, even with a TC2, which make a 400 5.6. So this is quite key. If you need to quickly extend, instead of carrying a much bulkier, maybe 100 to 400 lens, this can make really the job. And I will maybe show, let me switch my source here. So here you see it with the two teleconverters. I will go there Okay. Here you see the lens natively mounted. Here you see it with TC 1.4 and here with TC 2.0. So you see it stay really compact, and then you reach 400 millimeters without, again, extension of the the 100-400. Okay, and we'll see the performance. I will show you a little bit later some photo made with the TC2. It stay quite good. Okay, so let's start a little bit talking by the sharpness. Let me take this. Is it readable on your screen, Ian?
Yes, I can read this. Some of the other things are more difficult to read, and I'm sure that later on some of the pictures will not demonstrate, obviously, the full sharpness due to limitations of zoom. But in this particular case, I can see most of the text quite clearly.
Okay, so here I have really compared, in best condition on tripod with repeated measure, really sharpness of all those two Tamron lenses, the Sony GM1 and GM2. And I must say, I never tested a zoom with such a performance. Normally, the standard pattern is that wide open, you are very good. And then when you close down by one stop, like this Tamron, you get excellent results. Here, the behavior of the GM2 at 70 or even 200 millimeter is already excellent on wide open and become outstanding as soon as you close down by one stop, which is really kind of result you find normally in best prime, and here it is achieved on zoom, which is quite unique. So for me, in terms of zoom I've tested, this is simply the best ever zoom I've tested of more than, I think I've tested more than 70 zoom on my blog. This is simply the best one, period. There is no doubt about that. And I will show you a few comparison really after. What is interesting to know is also I tested, you see that here with the TC 1.4, even with the TC 1.4, it's excellent wide open and outstanding when you close down by one stop. So normally you directly see a drop of performance. Here, not at all. Even with the TC 1.4, you don't see such performance decrease. And I just remind, all that was tested with the A7R4, so the most demanding sensor, which is really suffers most lens. So here you get really very nice results. 400, there you, with the TC2, you don't have excellent result wide open, only quote unquote very good, but excellent as soon as you close down again by one stop. But when you compare to the other, it's really well above in terms of result, in terms of sharpness. I will just show you, I don't know if it will be really visible on the screen, just making a trial. Here, we compare. So here is the GM2 versus the Tamron, and at least on my screen, I can see a very clear difference at 100% between the two. And I made the same kind of comparison with all the lenses, and really this GM2 is largely above, I would say, the others.
I think the thing to say here is that to really get a proper comparison, people are going to have to visit the blog and look on their own screens, because really it is almost impossible to distinguish at this resolution.
Yeah, just to show you some sample. So, but go to the blog and you can even download the 60 megapixel version. If you want to see it fully on your screen, then you can test, look by yourself. So I will go to various criteria, still for the comparison, if you look here between, I will show you the resistance to flare. On the left, you've got the Sony GM2, and you see there is no artifact. You've got very nice sunstar. Whereas if you look to the Tamron, you see those halos. So the resistance to flare, it's clearly less good. If I take chromatic aberration like that, let me switch. Here you have almost nothing for the GM Mark II. You need really, in a very difficult situation, you see very small chromatic aberration here. But for a Tamron, you see here largely more purple halos that are visible. So also for this resistance to flare chromatic aberration, the GM2 is largely, I will say, above the others. Let's look a little bit about bokeh shape. So let me show you the evolution. So this is really the GM2 at 200 millimeters. You see a classical quite round in the center, but a little bit oval shape in the border, which is classical for this kind of things. But otherwise, you don't see really onion rings. You don't see purple fringing at the border. So really, those are really beautiful. You see the evolution. But even if it's very good, it's not as perfect, I will say, as a prime lens. If you really close down the aperture and you zoom at 100%, you see very, very little trace of onion fringing, much less than the others, but it's not as good as a pure prime like a 50 GM or a 135. But for zoom, it's one of the best I've seen for that criteria. But there, the prime have a little bit more, can achieve a little bit better. Here also here it's even with the TC, you see you still keep that very round and very circular bokeh balls. So a very good result also even with the TC. The bokeh ball shapes is not the only criteria. You need also to assess the softness of the background blur, because sometimes the background blur can be a little bit busy. Here it's very, very soft. You see it's very creamy, like a cappuccino milk. It's very smooth. And I've got here a scene that I have to compare. So I don't know if it will be visible, but on the left it is the GM, which give a much more smoother rendering of the texture. The background blur is much more smoother and become progressively blurry, but really with a very smooth gradation. And on the right, you've got the Tamron. Tamron is also very sharp, but the background blur is more nervous. It's more hard. So it doesn't give the same softness for this background blur. So if you do portrait, weddings, it's more nervous. We'll see that also here. You see here on the left, the smoothness when you've got leaves like that, it's sometimes very difficult to have a smooth background blur. Here it's very, very nice. You've got these leaves that are very sharp, but the background is quite smooth. On the right, for this flower, you see that the background blur, this is with the Tamron 70-180, it's much more hard, so it's more nervous. And it's much less pleasant for me to have that kind of background blur when I just compare the two. The Sony there really is much more creamy in terms of background blur. Do you have some questions so far? Some more questions, maybe?
No, this stage, everybody's gone quiet a little bit, but hopefully, as we move forwards, again, please don't be shy. Post your questions in the Q&A. So for the time being, it's still quite quiet, but anyway.
Okay, I will continue with some further sample. Here again, photo of two people. On the left here, you see the Tamron, which it's a little bit busy and nervous for the background blur. Whereas here on the right, you've got the Sony, which is much smoother and less distracting. So really, for me, this is a key criteria for such a portrait lens. The smoothness of the background blur of the bokeh, really key criteria. It's not just about price, sharpness, and the like. It's about the rendering of the skin, about the if it can render the smooth atmosphere or not. Even for here, you've got something taken on the street. On the left, you see the background blur has this smoothness, and on the right, it's more hard and nervous. So really, the rendering you get is really completely different. I will also compare some more close portraits. Here you see. Again, on the left, you've got the Tamron, and on the right, you've got the Sony. And here, if you look at the bokeh ball shapes, they are more truncated on the Tamron, much less on the Sony. And I've got other sample like here. Here it's both taken at f4 on both lens, and you see here clearly you've got more texture and more truncation on the Tamron versus the Sony, which is much more smoother and more circular. Here is really straight line, and here still you see some curve, which is much more smoother.
So Mark, I have a question from Marcel,
Yep.
and I think it's a fair one. It's a tough one because I think he's actually got a very valid point. He's asking, you know, first of all, why aren't the subjects the same, so that it's easy to make the comparison. I think this is probably made more difficult by the fact that it's very difficult to see on the zoom the differences. But yeah, is there not a way to make something, say, a little bit more scientific? I hear you using the words nervous and harsh and so on, but
so I will explain that first. When I got those lens, I'm just getting on loan, I will say, so I cannot keep them. And so when I got the GM2, I could not get at the same time to the two others. That's why I could not test exactly with the same subject, at least for the street photos, etc. And that's why it's different. Although for some, like you saw the chair, etc., I always come to the same place. So at least like this, the subjects are similar. Whereas for the bokeh balls, there it's always the same, and there you can really compare in detail exactly the same. So here I add, for example, the Tamron, and here I got the Sony. So for what I'm doing indoor, you get really something comparable. When I don't have both lenses at the same times, then it's similar stuff, but it's not exactly the same people that I took in portrait, indeed. But when you download them in full screen and then you see, then you can see the difference. For the quality for sharpness, there you can be kind of scientific with MTF charts, etc. And I try to summarize that in the table I show you with the rating, good, very good, outstanding, etc. And there it's quite comparable scientific. For assessing the quality of the bokeh, this is not to be measured because the shape or the smoothness of a background blur, it's also subjective. So this is my perception and my rating, but with image sample, and up to you to see. Of course, you need to consult the block if you don't see it well on the zoom. Up to you to see, do you see yourself a difference in terms of smoothness of this background blur, or for you they are both the same? If they are both the same for you, it means this criteria it's not important for you, and that is perfectly fine. But the assessment of things like bokeh, it's, yeah, there is a part of subjectivity in it. Okay, flare, resistance to flare, there you see if there is a flare or not, and there it's quite, yeah, I would say scientific. You see if there is chromatic aberration, yes or no. I don't know if it answers the questions.
Well, I'm sure if Marcel still has another question, then he's free to post again in the Q&A. That's great. So thank you very much for that question, Marcel. I think it's a fair one. And yeah, I can imagine there's always some challenge in terms of trying to keep the same angle of view or perspective. As you say, you know, there's always MTF charts, but when it comes to subjects, it's especially, as you say, when you get the lenses at different times, then it's not so easy to manage this type of challenge.
So if for my reader, so the one that will show, there is, for example, I've just recently tested a new lens, which is the Samyang 135, and there I had DGM, and there I could take exactly the same portrait with both lenses. So that's an article we publish next week normally. But so when I've got the possibilities, yes, I really try to do exactly the same for better comparison. If not, I try at least to make more than 100 photos with each lens, so that at least you've got enough variety of subjects to be able to make up your own mind. But what I say is not the truth. You need to look there, you need to look at others and make your own mind and decision. Okay. So I still have a few photos to show you, just to look at different samples made with the GM. Here you see some very nice also bokeh balls behind. Here in the street, you see again the smoothness of the background blur. And if you zoom in, okay, again, you won't notice really, maybe best in zoom, but it's extremely sharp while not being too contrasty, because sometimes a too sharp lens with too much micro contrast makes the skin very hard. Here, Sony, for that lens, has found really a perfect balance between very good sharpness, but still a nice, smooth render of the skin tone. And that's, for example, if you look at the Sony 35mm, you've got the 35 F1.8 and the 35 G Master. Both are really extremely sharp, the GM being a little bit better, but the 35 F1.8 is a little bit too contrasty and too hard for the skin. The GM has really a perfect balance for the rendering of the skin, not too harsh for the skin, but still very sharp. So this kind of balance to find the high level of sharpness by respecting, you know, the rendering of the skin, we don't begin to make that your post-processing, if you do weddings, beauty, portrait, you don't have to do a lot. It's already perfect, or with very little adjustment required out of the box. For some other, when it's too hard with the skin, it's difficult to do, it's more work to get the right level of smoothness for the skin that you want. So these are all little details that makes, I will say that those GM lens, and in particular the GM2, really not perfect, but really excellent and good for a lot of different aspects. I wanted also to talk you about the AF, the lens, because we didn't talk too much about that for the moment. Okay. So one of the key characteristics of the GM2 and the Sony GM native lens is that in general they are compatible with A9 and A1, 20 or 30 frames per second. If you take a non-native lens, you are in general limited to 8 frames per second. So if you do static portrait, this does not really matter. But if you are doing sports or fast-moving subject, this could be a key criteria. Even putting aside, because some say, okay, I'm doing some sport, but 10 frames per second is good enough for me, then is there a difference? Well, made some tests, but I could not show you that in details. It would be too complex to show that on Zoom. But if you look at the hit rate of a Sony GM, whether it's the GM1 or the GM2 versus a Tamron, the number of missed shot or nearly good but a little bit missed, you get something like 98, 99% for the GM2, and for Tamron, for a subject that is running at you in all directions, you are more close to 70%. So you may miss the shot. So it's 8 frames per second and 70% success rate versus 30 frames per second and 98 success rate. So it's really a big difference if you are shooting sport. So here I've got a little 30-second video that will show you a burst I made with the GM2. So not even at 20 or 30 frames per second, but you will see that all really, everything is sharp, is really like a video. Even if you've got this runner that goes before, the system keep the tracking, and every single photo are really ultra sharp, straight to the eyes is perfectly in focus. So I've got the underlying photos, and really, if you can zoom on any of the photos, they are all sharp. I will say boringly sharp. I really went to hundreds of photos, could not find. I had more than 98, 99 success rate. So really, for those kind of stuff, it's make really a very big difference if you are in doing fast-moving subject. This is really a key difference. Any other questions, Ian?
Well, at the moment, I actually have a question. If you think in terms of some of the elements that are being used to create this sort of performance, whether it's extreme spherical lenses or extra low dispersion glass and so on, that lens that contributes to the quality of the lens design. But one of the things that I think that a lot of people might not be aware of is the fact that some of these elements are floating on let's say, magnetized and floating on rails. So there's this very kind of linear, high speed and highly accurate motion within the lens, as opposed to maybe the rotary type of motion that you might experience with some other types of technology.
And this, there is this dual, special linear motor that you find here, which makes that when you shoot at 30 frames per second, the lens can move and focus more than 30 times per second exactly to the right position. And combined with the A1, it's really a war machine. It's really something fabulous in terms of accuracy.
Yeah,
it's
the
really
calculated 120 times a second on the A1. So that's an incredible amount of accuracy. I think that leads to those kind of results you mentioned earlier, which is actually almost 5 times better in terms of, if you think about the percentages you mentioned.
Yeah, it's 3 times more photos and all accurate instead of being only 70%. That is really yeah, a key difference. I wanted to show you again, maybe to talk a little bit about video. So in terms of video, here you've got a sample of the focus breathing. You know, the focus breathing is, in fact, when you focus near or far, sometimes there is a big difference in terms of frame. That zoom, it's very well controlled, so you don't see a big difference. There is a little one, but not as big as other zooms. So this is really quite good for video. I will also show you here a sample of video I made. So we won't go to the full video. And here, I don't know. Let's look at full HD first. Yeah. Here you see really the evolution of the bokeh balls, and you see that thanks to this clickless aperturing, there is no shock when you change the aperture. So it's really a fully linear gradation of the change of the aperture. So this is really good for video. This is with the TC 1.4.
So this is when you declick the lens, right? There's a button dedicated specifically to this function.
Yeah, if you let it click, you see each time a little shock in video, and you see that it's not continuous. Here, it's really a continuous variation of the size of the bokeh ball thanks to this clickless aperturing, which is really nice. Huh? And here again, you see the smoothness of the background blur. I will go also here. Also, here you will see the transition. So the IF speed in video, it's really, there is absolutely no issue. It's very good. You can choose the IF speed in the body. Really no issue with that. Here again, the same that we took in photos in video. You see the smoothness of the background. Yeah, this is, sorry, this is YouTube stuff. I will go there.
Yeah, for everybody, just to point out, we're reaching the end of the webinar. So if you do have any questions, I encourage you to pose them now, just so that yeah, we can get to them while Mark is showing this.
Yeah. Also, one thing that maybe I didn't spoke, but as usual with those GMMs, the color rendition is excellent. So this is just the high level of contrast of saturation. Sometimes, you know, with some lens, it's very sharp, but a little bit too contrasted, a little bit too dark. Here again, the rendering of the color, it's really natural. It's what you see with the eyes, not too pushy, not dull neither. So, and if you have several GM lenses, they've got this consistency of color rendition that you can use one lens and the others. You don't need to, you know, adjust the color rendering, etc. It just very, very well balanced in terms of color rendering. Really very little post-processing required. It's natural from the start.
And that's a very important point that often gets overlooked, is the consistency of rendition between the various lenses. Obviously, especially if you're shooting film or even obviously with photography, you want to have a consistent look throughout, and the GMs do a tremendous job of yeah, delivering that feature.
Yeah, here you see, you know, the focus breathing. At 70mm, there is zero focus breathing. 200, you've got a little bit, but quite well, quite minimal. So it's quite a very good performance for that kind of stuff. Let me go fasten a little bit to, yeah, some portrait here. You see very smooth background again. So also very good for video. Again, you can view that from the blog directly in 4K or on YouTube to get really the very high quality. Here you see the bokeh balls variation, you see, fully smooth, no click, so you can really get very nice result there. Going a bit faster. Yeah. Those kind, this was the picture from the title.
So we have quite a quiet group this evening, only a few questions, but I don't know if there's any other points that you want to get across as we move towards the end.
No, I think we are closing here. For me, I think I've spoken about most of the aspects. So let me go back to here. You will find all those samples here in the article with all the links to the flicker for the image. Also, distortion is quite minimal and automatically corrected. So all these criteria, you find them here, fully compared, the burst, everything. So you can see that really more calm in the blog and make your own mind and compare with the other lens if you need so. But really, this is one that after testing it, I really directly order it. I was waiting to have the 70-200, and really this is for me the one and the best one for the Sony E mount for the moment.